I should say good evening, everyone, not afternoon. Now it's past 6 o'clock, and welcome. Today's the Commission's public forum on our draft decision for GWMWater. My name's Kate Simons. I'm the chairperson of the Essential Services Commission. And just to let you know, this forum is being recorded just to make sure that there's access for anyone who was unable to attend this evening. Just to make you aware, any statement, comment or question you make will be included in the recording, and we'll plan to make that available on our website so others can access it as well. Just to start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of all the lands wherever you are today. For me, that's the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and waters of the service area of GWMWater. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal people who may be here today. Well, thanks very much for taking the time to come together this evening. First, I'd just like to take a moment to introduce some staff from the Commission. We have the Executive Director of Price Monitoring and Regulation, Marcus Crudden, with us. We've also got a Senior Regulatory Manager, Dean Wigginton. And we've got a number of other members of our water team at the Commission as well, and you'll be able to tell from the background with the ESC logo of many who've run the table as well. Just in terms of attendees from the water business this evening from GWMWater, I'd like to welcome Mark Williams, Managing Director. Welcome, Mark. And Sally Marshall as well, Executive Manager, Strategic Planning and Performance. Welcome, Sally, as well. And I think there's a number of other GWMWater staff online as well. We've also got a couple of other attendees, I think, and others may join us as we get underway tonight. So I'd just like to thank all the people for making the time to be online tonight to talk about GWM's pricing submission and process. All right, well, just before we get to the agenda, just some very quick housekeeping. If you do have any questions or comments while someone's talking tonight, please feel free to type them into the chat so we can build these into the conversation. It'd be great to keep your microphone muted when you're not speaking, just to avoid any feedback and background noise. And in addition to participating today, just a reminder, you can also provide some written feedback via the Engage Victoria website. Please do let us know if there's another preferred option for how you'd like to engage with us and with the water business. We're always open to feedback on that. The web address for Engage Victoria to be able to put a submission in will be on the slides, which I think we're about to start sharing with you in a moment. There we go. Thanks very much, team. Well, I'll just use the first part of today's forum to give you a brief introduction to our role in price regulation at the Essential Services Commission. But as always, the main purpose for an event like this is for us to really hear from you, hear what's front of mind and key for you to be able to ask some questions, and hopefully to be able to answer any questions you might have on our draft decision. And of course, the business is here tonight too to answer any questions that are best addressed by them. To help shape today's discussion, we'll be covering how we assessed the price submission and our draft decision. Then GWMWater will have the opportunity to respond to our draft decision, and then we'll have the opportunity to hear from you. So there'll be some time at the end. But as I said, if there's any other questions or things you wanted to raise during the course of the presentations, feel free to pop your hand up or pop something in the chat. Really appreciate being able to have an open and honest conversation with you today. We really value these engagements, and the insights from these engagements help us to shape our decisions on behalf of myself and my fellow commissioners. All right, well, just a little bit about us then. We regulate Victoria's energy, water and transport sectors, and we also oversee the Fair Go rate system for local government. We also administer the Victorian Energy Upgrades program as well. And we have had a role in regulating water prices for more than 20 years, including for the business tonight, GWMWater. And for the water sector, we approve prices and service standards. We monitor and report on performance, and we administer customer service codes as well. And we are currently reviewing new water prices to apply from 1 July 2023 for 14 of Victoria's water businesses. And the prices we go on to assess and then approve reflect an assessment of the efficient costs water businesses need to recover to provide valued services to customers. Following consultation, we will issue a determination that sets the maximum prices that GWMWater may charge its customers. And just in terms of how we've assessed the price submission from GWMWater and our draft decision, I'm going to hand over to Dean now just to step us through how we assessed the price submission that draft decision. So over to you, Dean. Thanks very much.
Good evening. Thanks, Kate, for that. Yeah, I'll just give a brief overview of firstly our assessment process and then just some thoughts on GWMWater's price submission. Just at a high level, as the Commission scrutinising the price submissions, we do that in accordance with a set of rules, and they're set out in the Water Industry Regulatory Order. That's a government-issued order that sets out the matters that we need to have regard to and consider when we're assessing a price submission put to us by a water business. And we reflect those obligations in our guidance paper that we issue the water businesses in advance of our review and to inform what they do in terms of their price submissions, how they go about developing it, with a big focus on consultation and engagement, and also the information that they need to give us for us to assess whether it complies with the water industry order and our guidance. In 2018, we started a new pricing approach called Primo. That is an incentive framework on the water businesses, but at its core, it's an expectation that businesses engage really well with their customers to find out what they prioritise and what their concerns are. And we do rate the price submissions through that process. So it acts as a bit an incentive for water business to make sure that they're in touch with what customers want and doing their best to add value through services and also the prices that they charge. As part of our process too, we do check that the price submissions meet the criteria in the Water Industry Act and also the ESC Act 2001, which was our overarching piece of legislation that guides what we do. Thanks. Next slide. As part of this, it's up to GWMWater to propose prices and services consistent with the Water Industry Regulatory Order, the guidance we issue, and the relevant legislation. So we go through and make sure and check that a business has done that. The role of our draft decision is to really signpost what we propose to approve or what we propose not to approve, and give the business, GWMWater, and other stakeholders a chance to respond before we make our final decision and price determination. So it's an important step in the engagement and testing process of testing our initial views. Thanks for that. Next slide. So where we're at, we put our draft decision out in early March, about a month ago now, and submissions close on our draft decision on the 28th of April. So we're sort of halfway through that point now. We'll get submissions in by the 28th of April. We'll consider those as part of our final decision that we need to make in June. And as Kate mentioned, new prices will apply from the 1st of July this year. And under GWMWater's proposal, that'll apply for a 5-year period. Thanks. The next slide. In terms of what we do in terms of assessing GWMWater's proposal, so we do have a strong look at its engagement, that GWMWater's done everything it can to find out what customers value most and has got good feedback, but also looking to how they've used that feedback. So what has GWMWater done in response to the views raised by those it consulted with? We run through its forecast expenditure with a fine-tooth comb. So this is basically with a view to assessing whether the expenditure is needed and going into something customers value or a compliance obligation that faces the business around health and safety, etc. And that the costs that it needs to deliver that reflect efficient expenditure. We often get help with, but we have expertise within the Commission, but we do get external help on that via a consultant, FTI Consulting, to test the claims put forward by GWMWater in terms of its operating costs, things like labour, energy and chemicals and things like that, and also its capital expenditure forecasts, so its spending on key projects. Verifying the supporting assumptions and data. So this is testing that the underlying numbers, so the assumptions that the business is using around input costs and things like that, are reasonable. Evaluating how GWMWater managed risk and also its performance. So how did it go in the current period on delivering on what it committed to for its customers? And in terms of risk management, is it accepting risk on behalf of customers to keep prices as low as possible? And is it appropriately managing risks like climate risk and things like that? I touched on OPEX and operating costs and capital expenditure earlier around those. We do have a look, particularly on the capital expenditure side of things, around the timing of business plans about when expenditure will take place and when projects will be in service and delivering an outcome to make sure that they're reasonable. Next slide, thanks. So just a summary of our draft decision. So the submission that we got from GWMWater, it was one of the 4 that we put out earlier than the other 10 that we've got in this. So we've got 14 in total through this review. Released a couple in December and released a couple in early March, and one of those was GWMWater. So that reflected, I guess, the value proposition for customers in that, and the strong engagement that the businesses did from our perspective. As I mentioned, a 5-year pricing period. Its forecast capital expenditure, I noted after our review, we determined was robust in our draft decision, and so we've ticked off its plans on that front. Some very minor corrections with operating expenditure that we've proposed just to correct things for some past data. It had proposed some changes to the GSL scheme as well. Some of that was around water reliability and changing some of the amounts and so on. So we've accepted that. And generally, tariff structures and the form of price control are unchanged. So there's been some slight changes around a new tariff around fire services, but generally things are remaining the same. And the business has a price cap form of price control. So businesses have some discretion about how they the framework that guides how their prices are determined, and it's chosen a price cap. What that does do is sets at a fixed amount the prices that customers will pay over a period. So it provides things like certainty. And also the business under those arrangements is managing demand risk on behalf of customers, which is a good thing. Overall, we've proposed something a bit lower in terms of the revenue requirement than proposed by GWMWater, not much though. But in response to our draft decision, it will need to provide us with an updated pricing schedule to reflect our adjustments to its revenue requirement. Next slide, thanks. Just quickly, this shows it over the overall programs for operating capital expenditure that we haven't really changed much in its proposals after our initial review. Next slide. Part of the, I guess one of the features of the proposal was its trend in operating costs is pretty flat compared to some other businesses, which in part I think reflects good cost control and operating cost side of things, but also embedded in the assumptions of GWMWater is a fairly high efficiency hurdle rate of I think it was about 1.5% per annum or thereabouts, which really means it's driving out efficiencies within the business, which gave us confidence in its forecast. So we saw good operating cost control. Next slide, thanks. This is gross capital expenditure. So I think the capital program in the current period was affected by a number of push-ins, so it's led to a bit of rephasing around projects that were dependent on government funding. Noting that GWMWater's projects do receive a bit of government funding. The next slide basically shows the net trends in net capital expenditure from the current period to the one that's coming up. This is what's reflecting current in customer prices after you take out contributions from government. Shows a bit of a pickup early in the period, then sort of coming off later in the period. And I think some of that reflects some of the rephasing of projects that were pushed from the current period into the next one to align with the timing of government confirmation of government funding. Thanks. The next slide. For customer bills, so in terms of movements, this is in real terms, so this does not include inflation. So currently bills for a typical residential owner occupier are just a bit over $1,400. They'll go down generally over the regulatory period, I think in the initial year by about 7% in real terms. So that, along with, I guess, its service proposition, it's the business is committed to focusing on things like water quality and things like that, suggest an improvement in customer value. Non-residential bills follow a similar path through that transition. So at a high level, you've got services generally being maintained, maybe with an ongoing focus on water quality projects and improvements, but lower bills in real term as well suggest that value's improving. Thanks. Next slide. I've touched on this a bit already here and there, but just one thing we have found for a couple of price reviews now that we do have confidence in GWMWater's engagement. It appears to engage well and use independent sort of ways to test its price proposal, which is good. Cost control was good in the current period. So we've seen across the sector a bit of a ramp up in costs, and some of that came from things like COVID, but also chemicals costs have been rising, and some of the inputs around projects have been rising relative to other businesses. The GWMWater's done quite well. As I mentioned earlier, good justification for operating costs in its capital program. So when we asked questions about its program, it was able to provide assurance that it was deliverable and reflected efficient costs. And the overall proposition, value proposition, which I also mentioned earlier, stacked up to us in our draft decision. So that's what we've put out there for further consultation. Next slide.
That's it.
I think that could be the end of my section. Thanks, Lucy.
Thanks very much, Dean. Good. Dean, I think I'm passing the baton back to me to then pass the baton to Mark Williams and Sally Marshall from GWMWater, just to provide a bit of a presentation on your response to the draft decision. So thanks very much, Mark. Over to you.
Thanks, Kate. And I'll just do a few introductory remarks and then I'll hand over to Sally. But first and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge that we are actually meeting on the land of the traditional owners, the Wotjobaluk, Jawa, Jadadwali, Wawiago and Janbalak people, and I pay there is my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. So with that strong cultural engagement in our region and with that strong representation in the development of our price submission as well. Probably just to reflect, this is our 5th price submission, and probably in all of those submissions, we've generally never been very far apart in our position on outlook. And I'd like to think that our interests are the same as the ESC's interest, that the best interest is for our community and the customers we service. And with that, we've not been too disparate in the pricing policies and outcomes. I think that just reach back to 2008, which was when we're developing the price submission in 2007, in our region, we had 3% in our storages, and with that, everyone on stage 4 restrictions, and with that, a proposed pipeline project that would secure water for the region. And with that, we had a substantial uplift in pricing then, and certainly had good consensus around the price and service outcomes that would materialise from that. Wind forward to 2018, and the ESC introduced the Primo framework, and we really embraced the Primo framework. We always thought we were there with the extent of community engagement we had, and with that, we formed a deliberative panel. We refined that concept this year with rebadging the community panel, but in that we got probably a better representation, particularly of a broader socioeconomic mix of people on the panel, and with that, they did drive us a bit further on value as well. Before I do hand over to Sally, I'd like to acknowledge the contribution of our staff. They have done a great job with putting together the price submission, the engagement process. From the time that we finish a price submission, we start engaging on the concepts for the next one. So Sally will allude to that in our model, but Sally's led a team, but the executive members of our staff, Nick Mumford, Nalika Vitharana and Adele Rhodey, did a great job in putting it all together, and then other key players like Chris Wright and others in our team. So with that, I'll hand over to Sally and she'll present the base of our price submission again.
Thank you, Mark. And I'll just double check that you can all see the slides. Yep, thank you. So I'll go through and just touch on essentially some of the points which Dean's covered in his précis of their review of our price submission and our response to the draft decision. So just before I go, as I go through, I thought it was just good from a context point of view in terms of looking at the region that we service and all the different services that we provide across our footprint. So you can see from the map on the right and just down the bottom on the right, we cover roughly a third of the state of Victoria. We provide the full range of services from end to end in terms of water and wastewater across that whole footprint that you can see on the map. So there's a number of urban towns which we provide water and to a number of those wastewater services. And then also across the footprint, rural pipeline, domestic and stock services as well. So they're certainly a major part of our services to our customers, but we also do, in providing that service, maintain and have services to other headworks and environmental customers as well. As you head towards the border, we do have resource management responsibilities on behalf of the Water Minister. So we also provide licensing and resource management oversight for groundwater services and surface water diversion customers as well. In terms of our price submission and our commitment, which we put forward within the submission itself, again, under the PRIMO framework, preparing or developing outcomes and continually reporting back against those as we go through the regulatory period is an important mechanism and also an opportunity to make sure we are delivering value to our customers and getting feedback from them as we go. So as we come into the next regulatory period, we did review and refine the outcomes that we will be reporting against and again, monitoring and modifying those based on feedback that we receive. So touching on each of them, so safe drinking water across the footprint, and the previous slide did note that there are a number of customers that don't receive a drinking water supply. So we understand the importance of making sure that we also have visibility and report in terms of how we're performing and tracking against providing value to those customers. So there's the two for clean non-drinking water, so for our urban customers and our rural pipeline customers as well. The outcomes that we do have, and you'll see it if you look as you look in our price submission document itself, it does drive a lot of our investment programs, and it really is about trying to make sure we continue to deliver value against each of these different commitments. Fundamentally reliable and affordable services, so of the customers that are receiving services, making sure that we are meeting those service outcomes, that they are affordable, and there has been a strong focus over all the previous regulatory periods, but also coming into the next one to make sure that we continually looking for opportunities to be more efficient and to manage our costs to make sure we're providing affordable services. And then the final one there, healthy and livable region, given our connection with the community, understand the importance of recreation or other pursuits as well in terms of having water available for other activities, and we value that as an outcome, and it's important to manage across the regulatory period. So Mark touched on briefly in terms of our engagement model, and that is something that is an ongoing process. It's continuously a feedback loop for us, and we have a number of different ways that we receive feedback from customers. For this pricing submission, based on, I guess, the feedback we receive through those different forums, surveys, and different customer contacts, it all culminated in a community panel, as Mark mentioned, where we presented a number of topics to get the specific feedback and thoughts from customers in the community as to their support or otherwise for the different proposals that we included in this price submission. In terms of our infrastructure plan, across this current regulatory period, and Dean had some slides which provide a comparison over the previous one and coming into the current regulatory period. So over the next 5 years, we are proposing to spend just over 200 million gross or 160 million net on the capital program. As Dean mentioned, we do have some major externally funded projects, rural pipeline extension projects in particular. So those are projects that are providing services to new customers, but they are also improving our productivity and efficiency. In terms of our capital program, there is a strong focus on renewals, and almost half of the program that we've included is actually renewing some of our ageing assets and infrastructure. We did test our program through the community panel, and particularly how that also translated into the service standards that customers receive. So they certainly challenged us and questioned us in terms of the basis of the program that we were putting forward. In terms of some service upgrades and improvements, a couple of major ones noted in here. So with drinking water quality upgrade projects, we're including 2 additional towns in this next regulatory period, and we still have 2 towns to complete from the current regulatory period, which will carry over across regulatory periods. So that's Kaniva and Moyston that are carrying across, and then also Berrywillick and Kalgoa. The other point or project that's of note there is improving water quality for our Northern Mallee pipeline customers. We are, I guess, historically been exposed to some of those water quality issues from the Murray system, and we investigated options to be able to improve, in particular, Piangle and Nye sections of the Northern Mallee pipeline. The last one there, in terms of improving fire services, we did engage directly with those customers and to gauge their support for improving the pressure in terms of the supply to the commercial premises. In terms of other key initiatives, a couple of others to note on our urban customer charter, we are proposing, and this was based also on feedback that we received from our customers and the community panel, but to actually increase the minimum flow rate for our urban customers to 20 litres per minute. We are planning to, and we'll consult with some of the smaller urban towns just to make sure if there are different options for providing services to those towns that would result in better value for those, for those particular customers. So we will undertake that through this next regulatory period. We undertook a bulk water pricing review, and that's again given our system and the way that it operates. It services a large proportion of our footprint, and there's a lot of infrastructure in place to service the towns and both the rural customers. And we undertook a review which is included in our price submission. So there was some, I guess, recommendation from that review, and reflected that within our proposed prices over this next regulatory period. In terms of the recreational water pricing policy, proposing to continue the existing policy we have in place, and also consult further with our non-residential customers regarding contributions. Dean briefly touched on guaranteed service levels, and we have proposed 2 new GSLs for the next regulatory period. The final one there around our cost efficiency target. So this provides that long-term view of our operating expenditure, and as mentioned, we have built in that efficiency target of 1.4% per annum, and this also factors into or takes into account some of those growth projects or new services that we're providing as well across the coming regulatory periods. In terms of revenue requirement, this is comparing what the previous determination was, and once factoring in, I guess, our assumptions coming into the next regulatory period, and also some of the other inputs into the formula or the basis for setting the revenue requirement. You can see coming into the next regulatory period that there is that reduction compared to what was previously assumed. The guaranteed service levels, so again, under the model and that relationship between the outcomes that we're reporting, the service standards, which are reflected in our customer chartered, the guaranteed service levels are another way for us to monitor and be accountable for the services that we provide. So we undertook a review of the GSLs that we had in place previously, and identified that we did have a gap where customers were experiencing multiple interruptions, whether that be urban or unplanned urban water interruptions, if they were receiving more than 5, or more than 3 sewer blockages in a year. So yeah, we identified that was a gap, and proposed and have included 2 new GSLs off the back of that review. So just, I guess, in summary, in terms of our response to the draft decision, we certainly welcome the draft decision. We believe that we put forward our best plan, so and that it is the prudent and efficient in terms of what we're proposing. We remain committed to no real price increases. The tariffs, or the table that was shown earlier, was presenting some of those urban tariffs, but in the table on the top right of the screen, you can see across all the other services, the reduction was applied across each of the different categories or customer services. In terms of ongoing or continuous improvement and management, we'll continue as we have in previous regulatory periods, and there'll be a strong focus on delivering against those outcomes and monitoring our performance as we go, and really making sure that we are delivering value to the customers and to the region more broadly. And finally, remaining accountable for the delivery of our programs. And certainly over the previous regulatory period, we've demonstrated that with our proposals, we'll stay accountable for the actual delivery of those as well as we go. So that actually brings me to the end, and I know that you've got some more process that you'll run through.
That's great. Thanks very much, Sally and Mark. Really appreciate the presentation on your response to the draft decision and just an overview of your pricing submission as well. You're right, Sally, we're sort of at the point in the agenda now to sort of open it up for some discussion and questions. So at this point, it'd be great to hear any views from outside the Commission on anything that's been raised or on other topics or concerns. So it'd be great to hear from anyone online today that wanted to raise some questions. There's just a slide there about how you can engage with us. So and that this forum is being recorded. But feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself if you'd like to raise anything for the business or the Commission. We find it really useful, as I said before, to hear directly from you about what you think about the business's price submission, but also about the Commission's draft decision and how the business might respond to that. I might just check with the team and see if there are any hands up or anyone wanted to pop something in the chat. Can't see any myself, but There's a couple of attendees who weren't from the business and weren't from the commission, so please feel free to jump in. Thanks, team. Just said no hands. I'm not missing anything. I wonder if there's as a segue just to pose a couple of questions and see if there are any areas of potential interest for discussion. I might just pop a couple of questions out there to see if there's something that anyone would like to contribute to. A couple of things, perhaps any feedback on the Commission's draft decision on the prices proposed by GWMWater. Always interested to know any feedback on, I guess, overall bills, proposed changes to fixed and variable charges, what that means for different types of customers within the GWM water region. That was probably one area of interest I wouldn't mind having some feedback on if anyone wanted to pop anything in the chat or raise a hand. Can't see any for those, although I can see a couple of other cameras have come on. Hi Phil, how you going?
Yeah, I just want to ask, we run a holiday park in Wartook. We have a lot of complaints with people staying here about the quality of water. They say, why is it so brown? And I said, it comes straight from the lake. It comes through the pipeline. I rang up GWMWater and they said, we'll flush it out for you. I've had that much dirt coming through our system and they said it came up to, I don't know what the numbers mean, but they said acceptable level is 15 of particles, it must be, that's coming through the pipeline. They said it went up to 80 at one stage and it comes, and at one stage it was back down to about 50. I complained about why are we getting charged for this water when it's just water straight from the lake, it's not filtered or anything. I understand we'll pay for the charges, for the service charges, that's fine. We've even had customers that said, I can't be here with this water, it is too brown, I might get sick from it. How are we supposed to run a business like this when you're asking for a rise in water when we can't even run a business with proper water sent to us?
Thanks very much, Phil. Appreciate you raising those issues today. It's great to have the business around the table as well as the Commission when you're raising issues like this. Sounds like you've had some engagement with the business already on this water quality issue. I might actually direct your question to perhaps Mark or Sally if you wanted to have anything to respond to Phil, given we're talking about water quality and the business's response and engagement, I guess, with customers more broadly. So maybe over to you, Mark.
Yeah, I might start. I think that Phil, if you're at Wartook, you're obviously taking water off the Wartook system before it gets to the water treatment plant. So you're right in terms of it's not a warranted drinking water supply, and that's part of an accepted sort of supply arrangement for those customers that are not receiving a drinking water supply. It's an acceptable framework under Department of Health, and with that. I don't have that visibility. I must admit, I might hand over to Nick when I'm finished, because Nick will probably have a bit more visibility about the service arrangements directly with you. But certainly, probably one thing that we do have in our price submission is a commitment to undertake studies to augment supply, and one of those opportunities will be to effectively pipe the water from a closer offtake from the Wartook system right through to the Mount Zero water treatment plant, and that will improve water quality generally. So just to explain the way that system works, it comes down the Mackenzie River. There's a weir structure where it gets diverted into a channel. The channel is an earthen channel which runs from that point to the Mount Zero water treatment plant, around about 10 kilometres, and then it gets treated and then it's brought to Horsham. So it's been more an opportunistic water supply for the Wartook Holiday Park. So that's probably where the starting point is. We can, and happy to work with you around how we might be able to get a localised water treatment plant or facility that will improve the water quality. If I reflect back on similar arrangement where we had before we improved water quality in Donald, one of the industrial customers we have there had a particular problem that they were still receiving an treated water supply before we upgraded water quality. We put in a local water treatment plant and adjusted the tariff accordingly to a drinking water supply. So more than happy to work with you on something like that, Phil. As I said, this is the first time it's sort of been made aware to me, but Nick may be a bit more aware from a servicing perspective.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah. Phil,
that'd be great if you can, because I have rang up quite a number of times and they have said, we'll keep on coming and flushing the pipeline out where you are and we'll keep on flushing. And I said, that's good, no problems. But what about our tanks where it goes into, because it gets pumped into our tanks? I had to get them cleaned out because they had that much dirt on the bottom of them because of the dirt coming straight through. So it'd be good. I'm not worried about that. I just wanted to know if we can move forward on getting better water to us, so we don't have customers even putting on our reviews saying, don't go there, you can't get clean drinking water, the water's brown and everything like that. So we just want to run a business that we can have something decent, that's all.
Thanks, Phil. Nick, did you want to add anything else to what Mark's said from the business's perspective? It sounds like we've got some engagement to come, I guess, in terms of the business taking this up with Phil post the forum tonight, but wanted to give you the opportunity, Nick, if you wanted to add anything else to that.
Yeah, I think following on from Mark's comment, yeah, a point of use treatment process would be something we could quite easily explore. I do know we certainly have been challenged over the water quality in the from water talking in that system on the back of obviously the high rainfall flood events that we had across the region. That has impacted the colour and sedimentation in the water. That is slowly improving and we expect it to continue to improve over time, which is why our staff are continuing flushing the system to try and draw better quality water through as it continues to settle through the lake itself. But unfortunately, it is an untreated supply that actually runs through earthen channels. So there is that continued potential for future impact.
Thanks very much, Nick. Phil, did you want to discuss any further in terms of those aspects you've raised? Otherwise, we could probably leave it to the business and yourself to carry on the conversation after tonight. But feel free if you want to jump back in.
No, that's fine. Just want to see if we can work together and try to get this water under control. That's all.
That's great. Thank you, Phil. I appreciate you raising that today at the forum, and you've certainly got the business's attention in terms of carrying that conversation forward. So that's great to hear. Thanks very much, Mark and Nick. Phil, was there anything else you wanted to add into the conversation tonight? It's always really valuable to hear directly from customers of water businesses when we're in this type of forum. But if there's anything else you wanted to add into what we're looking at in terms of moving from draft to final or your engagement with the business, absolutely take the opportunity if you'd like to. Yeah,
no, everything's fine. Thank you. I'll work with them and we'll try to work something out. That'd be great.
That's great. All right. Well, thanks very much, Phil, for that and for your time to be here tonight at the forum. That's great. If there's, I just wanted to open it up if there was any other areas of discussion to have tonight while we've got everyone around the table. I'm not sure who else we've got online, team, but please do tell me if there's any hands up to be able to have a discussion on. I mean, I think there's a couple of other areas in terms of just prompting some discussion about, what else should the Commission be considering before we move from that draft decision to the final price review decision for GWMWater, or anything else you'd like to raise. Mark, go for it. Your hand's up.
Yeah, look, I know that Sally's been tracking some of the commentary on your posting in your social media traffic. I think probably one of there's a couple of interesting ones, one around the sort of fixed and variable tariff, and the other one's been around the customer portal. And probably on the fixed and variable tariff, our costs are really very much fixed, and we've generally shifted and skewed our tariffs a little bit more towards volumetric as we've typically adjusted our tariffs moving forward. But it does reflect our cost base. But probably the more interesting one's been around the portal. That was a key initiative in the last price submission, the introduction of the digital meters, and with that they've been a key source of the productivity improvements we've had. Probably one of the discussions we did have in the lead up to this submission was to what extent we warrant the service. Certainly, we try to keep the portal up and available as much as we possibly can, and have high levels of availability. And it was pleasing to see that that extent, if it wasn't available for a period of time, that those customers alerted us to it. So it's been used quite substantially. It's certainly helped to drive improved water efficiency and certainly a high level of take up by our customers of the portal. But certainly it's a service that we make available free, and with that and certainly looking to improve its functionality across and performance across the business.
Thanks very much, Mark. That's really interesting couple of insights there, and great to hear the business kind of keeping track of what sort of customer and other comments are sort of being elicited from some of the social media after the release of our draft decision and your price submission itself. So I'm hoping that out of that process, as well as the forum tonight, we'll get some more submissions into the Engage Victoria website too, that can be popped into our submission process for feedback before we move from draft to final for commissioners to consider. So thanks for drawing those to our attention, Mark. That's great. And the team have just put up another slide just to remind everyone around the table that of the process of where we move to from here. So I wonder, team, it's 6:50, unless there's any other hands up or areas of interest from attendees tonight. Just wanted to give a final opportunity to raise them now. Otherwise, I might move to closing the session and talking about next steps and timing. But I just want to make sure I have captured everybody else's an opportunity to raise anything you'd like to while we've got you around the table. Team, I don't think there's any other hands up or indication of anyone wanting to speak. Nothing in the chat either, I don't think. No, thanks, team. Always good just to make sure I'm not missing anything. All good. All right. Well, with that in mind, and given the time, maybe I'll move to close the forum now. But thank you very much, everyone, for your time that you've taken to come and be with us tonight. That's been a great conversation, and to hear directly from the business and community as well. As was just on that slide then, just between now and the 28th of April, that's when submissions will close on our draft decision. So I really encourage everyone to, if you've got any questions or further aspects you'd like to take up to enable you to make a submission, please feel free to liaise with Marcus Dean and the Commission's water team. They're available to field any questions you might have before you put in a submission or anything else about the process. But on that basis, on behalf of the Commission, my commissioners and also staff, I'd just like to extend my sincere thanks for everyone to joining us tonight. It's been great to hear your thoughts, and very much looking forward to hearing further feedback through our consultation process before we move to a final decision. All right, well, with that in mind, I think I've covered off process and timing and next steps. So on that note, thank you everyone for your attendance tonight, and I'll move to close the meeting. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a good night.